Have you ever heard of a story wherein a person who was enslaved escaped and then became a conductor on the Underground Railroad, where she led dozens of others to escape slavery? It sounds like a plot for a movie, right? But this story is actually not fictional, but the real-life story of an iconic woman in America. Who is she, and why is she an icon of freedom today? Let's find out. Hi, welcome to our channel. Today we'll discover the life of another remarkable woman who lived in a very tough time. Her name is Harriet Tubman, a woman who escaped from slavery and helped others do the same through the Underground Railroad before the Civil War. Other than that, she also worked as a nurse, spied for the Union, and supported women's right to vote. She truly is an inspiration for many today. Before we begin, have you heard stories about Harriet Tubman before? Tell us in the comments below. Now, let's get to know this courageous woman. Harriet Tubman, often called the Moses of her people, was once a slave but managed to escape. She played a crucial role as a conductor on the Underground Railroad, guiding others to freedom. Tubman went on to serve as a scout, spy, guerrilla soldier, and nurse for the Union Army in the Civil War. Also, she holds the distinction of being the first African-American woman to serve in the military. Harriet Tubman was born in March 1822 on a plantation in Dorchester County, Maryland, to parents Harriet Green and Benjamin Ross. Originally named Araminta Ross and affectionately called Minty, she later changed her first name to Harriet in tribute to her mother. Rit worked as a cook in the plantation's main house, while Benjamin was involved in timber work. Harriet had 8 siblings, but the harsh realities of slavery led to the family being separated, despite Rit's efforts to keep them together. At the age of 5, Harriet was hired out as a nursemaid, a position where she endured whipping whenever the baby cried, leaving lasting emotional and physical scars. Around the age of 7, she was hired out to set muskrat traps for a planter and later worked as a field hand. Harriet expressed a preference for physical plantation labor over indoor domestic chores. At the age of 12, Harriet demonstrated her commitment to justice when she intervened to protect a fugitive from an overseer who was about to throw a heavy weight. Harriet positioned herself between the enslaved person and the overseer, taking the blow to her head. Recalling the incident, she said, "The weight broke my skull. They carried me to the house all bleeding and fainting. I had no bed, no place to lie down on at all, and they laid me on the seat of the loom, and I stayed there all day and the next." Harriet's act of kindness resulted in lasting consequences, including chronic headaches and narcolepsy throughout her life. This condition caused her to experience sudden and deep sleep at unpredictable times. Additionally, she began having intense dreams and hallucinations, which she often attributed to religious visions, given her strong Christian faith. Unfortunately, her health issues made her less appealing to potential slave buyers and renters. Around 1844, Harriet Tubman married John Tubman, a free black man. In 1849, fearing that she and the other slaves on the plantation would be sold, Tubman decided to escape. She set out on foot one night, receiving help from a friendly white woman. Following the North Star, she made her way to Pennsylvania and then Philadelphia, where she found employment and saved money. The next year, she returned to Maryland, guiding her sister and her sister's 2 children to freedom. She undertook risky journeys back to the South to rescue her brother and 2 other men. On her 3rd return, she sought her husband, only to discover he had married someone else. Undeterred, she continued to assist other slaves in their quest for freedom, making multiple trips to the South. Tubman developed ingenious strategies for successful missions, such as using the master's horse and buggy for the initial part of the journey, departing on a Saturday night to avoid early newspaper notices, turning back south if she sensed potential slave hunters, and carrying a drug to quiet a crying baby that might jeopardize the fugitives. She also carried a gun to discourage tired or hesitant fugitives, telling them, "You'll be free or die." What are your thoughts about the fearless Harriet Tubman so far? Put them in the comments below. Now, let's go back to Tubman's journey of freeing other slaves. Years later, the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act permitted the capture and enslavement of fugitive and freed workers in the northern states. This significantly complicated Harriet Tubman's role as an Underground Railroad conductor, compelling her to guide enslaved individuals further north to Canada. These journeys took place at night, typically during the spring or fall when the days were shorter. Over the following decade, Harriet formed alliances with fellow abolitionists like Frederick Douglass, Thomas Garrett, and Martha Coffin Wright. She also established her own network within the Underground Railroad. While it is widely reported that she liberated around 300 enslaved individuals, there is some skepticism about the accuracy of these numbers. Harriet's biographer, Sarah Bradford, may have estimated and exaggerated the figures, as Harriet herself claimed that the actual numbers were much lower. Regardless, it is believed that Harriet personally led at least 70 enslaved individuals to freedom, including her elderly parents. Moreover, she provided guidance to numerous others on how to escape independently. Harriet asserted, "I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger." Later on, slaveholders placed bounties on Harriet Tubman, offering rewards for her capture, while abolitionists praised her bravery. John Brown, who sought her advice for his own plans to lead an anti-slavery raid on a federal armory in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, now in West Virginia, even referred to her as General Tubman. Around 1858, she purchased a small farm near Auburn, New York, where she settled with her elderly parents, whom she had brought out of Maryland in June 1857. Tubman lived there from that point onward. When the Civil War began in 1861, Harriet Tubman found new ways to combat slavery. She was enlisted to aid fugitive enslaved individuals at Fort Monroe and took on various roles, including nurse, cook, and laundress. Leveraging her knowledge of herbal medicines, Harriet provided medical assistance to ailing soldiers and escaped enslaved people. In 1863, she assumed leadership of an espionage and scouting network for the Union Army. Harriet played a crucial role in furnishing essential intelligence to Union commanders regarding Confederate Army supply routes and troop movements. Additionally, she assisted in the liberation of enslaved individuals, enabling the formation of Black Union regiments. Despite her stature of just over 5 feet, Harriet Tubman was a formidable force. However, it took more than 3 decades for the government to acknowledge her military contributions and provide her with financial recognition. Between 1862 and 1865, Harriet Tubman served as a scout, nurse, and laundress for Union forces in South Carolina throughout the Civil War. Working with the 2nd Carolina Volunteers, led by Colonel James Montgomery, Tubman conducted espionage in Confederate territory. Upon returning with valuable information about the locations of warehouses and ammunition, Montgomery's troops executed well-planned attacks. Despite her significant contributions during the war, Tubman received such meager compensation that she had to sustain herself by selling homemade baked goods. Following the Civil War, Harriet Tubman settled with her family and friends on land she owned in Auburn, New York. In 1869, she married Nelson Davis, a former enslaved man and Civil War veteran, as her previous husband, John, had passed away in 1867, and the couple later adopted a little girl named Gertie. Harriet maintained an open-door policy for anyone in need, financing her philanthropic efforts through the sale of homegrown produce, pig farming, and receiving donations and loans from friends. Despite being illiterate, she toured parts of the Northeast as a speaker for the women's suffrage movement and collaborated with prominent suffrage leader Susan B. Anthony. In 1896, Harriet purchased adjacent land and established the Harriet Tubman Home for Aged and Indigent Colored People. The head injury she suffered in her youth continued to affect her, leading to brain surgery to alleviate her symptoms. However, her health declined, prompting her move to her namesake rest home in 1911. Harriet Tubman passed away on March 10, 1913, due to pneumonia, but her legacy endures. Numerous schools and museums bear her name, and her story has been revisited in books, movies, and documentaries. In 2016, the United States Treasury declared that Harriet Tubman's portrait would replace that of former president and slave owner Andrew Jackson on the $20 bill. Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin, who served during President Trump's administration, later revealed that the introduction of the new bill would be postponed until at least 2026. However, In January 2021, President Biden's administration announced plans to expedite the design process for the bills that would commemorate Tubman's legacy. Despite the hardships and challenges Harriet Tubman endured, she devoted her life to compassion and equality. Whether it was liberating enslaved individuals, advocating for women's suffrage, or caring for the elderly, Harriet Tubman remained a resilient and determined figure throughout her life, and her impact endures long after her passing in 1913. Visitors to the Harriet Tubman National Historical Park in central New York have the opportunity to delve into the causes she championed and explore the area where she spent the rest of her free life. Harriet Tubman's final resting place is at the Fort Hill Cemetery, located across the street from the Visitor Center. What was the most inspiring fact you learned about Harriet Tubman in this video? Comment them down below. If you enjoyed watching this video, give it a like, hit subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Thanks for watching.